Welcome in to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Today, folks, we get back to basics. Today, we're going to talk about some old-fashioned ghost stories. And I know a lot of you love to hear some good old-fashioned hauntings, some good old-fashioned tales, and we may even end up in your neck of the woods. That's right. We may even end up, let's just say, in your backyard. We're going to go all over the U.S. today. And my apologies if we don't get over the pond for those of you who are listening internationally. We've got a wonderful book. In fact, I've got a wonderful book in front of me that we're going to talk about today. We've got Mike Kozlowski with us today. And he has written a terrific book, folks, a book that I encourage you to get. It's in the description of this program. We've got a link to it. It's called American Ghost Stories, True Tales from All 50 States. And I'll tell you, folks, there's a few of these locations, quite a few of these locations that I've been to personally that I was pleased to see are in this book. But there's a few that I was surprised to read about that I had no clue about. And the wonderful thing about this book is that Mike writes this book with a wonderful sense of humor and timing. And not only do you just get the facts, ma'am, but you also get it delivered with a wonderful sense of style. So I had a great time sitting down with this book and reading this book. Let me tell you a little bit about Mike before we bring him in. Michael Kozlowski has written a range of books, including a short horror and suspense story collection. Some days suck, some days suck worse, which you got to love the title. The psychological suspense novella Above the Clouds is also one of his post-apocalyptic John Angel horror novels, Angel of Death and Fallen Angel, and a travel memoir about his family's adventure moving to and living in Australia. We might have to talk about that for a moment. That sounds like an adventure in itself. Mike lives in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan, with 3 spoiled dogs. You got to love that. We love our puppies here on the program. He's an active member of the local art and music community and tries to be as cool as his friends. I think he's a bit cooler. He's done a few more things, I think, than they have. Mike is a member of the Horror Writers Association, and let's welcome in right now to Darkness Radio, Mike Kozlowski. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. What a fantastic introduction. Jeez, man, I don't know if I can live up to all that.
Oh, you do, sir. You do indeed. Um,
Well,
Before we start talking about haunted places, first of all, let's talk about Australia. What possessed you to move your family to Australia? What was the story behind that?
yeah, so I'm a very left brain, right brain guy. So my day job, I'm an engineer.
Okay.
So about as far opposite as you can get from being an artist, right?
Uh-huh.
But I had the opportunity to take a job over in Australia. It kind of happened accidentally. I thought they were looking for somebody in the States and they were moving their, a company or a satellite office or something to the States, but instead they were looking for somebody to go there. And I did about everything I could do to talk them out of hiring me, but they kept meeting my demands. So eventually I was like, yeah, I got, why not? It's an adventure. I'm a kind of guy that tells his kids, don't be afraid to try something, right? And what kind of role model would I be? So yeah, me and the family went over. My kids were young. I'm since divorced, but my wife at the time, you know, we went there for a little bit over a year, and it was a great experience. We made great friends. The country's beautiful. Everybody's nice. It was really really a good experience as far as that goes. But I'm the type of person who I travel a lot for work and just love to travel anyway. And I'm the type of person who'll grab a book about, okay, I'm going to Korea. I want to know about the customs. I want to know about this. I don't want to be the dumb American that shows up on their doorstep,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So with Australia, it was even more. So, I had to know about taxes. I had to know about the immigration stuff. I had to, I wanted to know about the spiders and the snakes and then the history always interests me. Similar to American Ghost Stories, there's a lot of history in that book. So I had a pile of books. I must have had 10 books, by the time I'm like, there should just be a book about moving to Australia. It should be easier than this. So, so I started writing it, and it ended up being sort of a memoir, our adventures. And I might talk about, we went on a hike and we saw, a blue tongue lizard, or we saw a brown snake run across. So then I'd go into, more about the animals and the poisonous snakes and the spiders, or I'd talk about going down to the Sydney Harbor, and then I'd talk about, Captain Cook and whatever, and, just kind of tied my experiences into the whole history and everything else. And it was a blast to write. It was just so much fun, and was the first thing I really wrote. I had no real interest in being a writer. I'd never even considered it. I'd always just, I was more music and art, but I ended up having an expat site picked it up, published it online, and they were selling copies. And I got an email one time, from California. Oh, your book helped me so much. It was so great and it was so fun to read and all this.
Wow.
And I was like, man, that was great. I want to write some more stuff.
Yeah.
But I wasn't moving anywhere, so I had nowhere else to go. So instead of being Bill Bryson, I decided I'd be Stephen King, and I've always been a big horror fan, so I decided I'd, kind of write what you love. I'm not so much a write what you know guy. I like writing about stuff I have no idea about. It's just more entertaining for me. But it's stuff I love. So,
we have a quite a sizable audience in Australia, and the one thing I love is I love communicating with people from Australia. You're right. They're absolutely friendly. They're wonderful people. And I keep hearing about how lovely Australia is. I've just never had the chance to go. And I want
yeah,
to. They
I
have,
can't wait to get back.
I don't know if you found this out when you lived there, but they have a huge paranormal community. They
Uh, I didn't, at the time I was not really into the writing. Not really, I was a horror fan, but I wasn't writing horror stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm even newer, for all your listeners, to the paranormal genre. American Ghost Stories is really my first venture into that genre. I got a couple more books I'm working on now, really, really enjoying it, enjoying the people, enjoying the groups. So, it's kind of a journey along with the readers, where, some of them will know more than I do, and some of them will be learning with me. And, but so I didn't really research the Australian paranormal community anyway at the time. But now that I know, and also I'm glad that I said a lot of nice things about Australia since you have such a big listening audience.
yes, way to cover. No, I'll tell you, for your first time out for a paranormal book, you did a bang up job. I mean, you really were thorough. Not only thorough, but thorough, entertaining. There's a lot of stuff that you knocked out of the park with it, and you got some stuff that I'll admit, for a guy who's been doing this for 18, 19 years, you you found some stuff that surprised me that you dug up. Um, there's even a couple of places that I've trudged around that I didn't know about, that I've trudged around quite a bit. There's a place, and we'll get to it later in the show, but uh, I had a cousin who lived out in Colorado. And you talk about Thornton, Colorado. When you talk about backwater Colorado, right? And you talk about a place that, I mean, there's just not very many people, right? Between Thornton and Brighton, Colorado. I mean,
Right.
that is out there, right? I mean, that's out there. And well, like I said, we'll talk about it later. But
Yeah, Riverdale Road out in Thornton,
Riverdale Road,
Colorado.
that's right,
Yeah.
Riverdale Road. But when I read that you were talking about Riverdale Road, I went, holy cow, this guy did research. I mean,
Well,
that is
it was
digging.
important to me, the genre is big, right? There's a lot of books out there. And there's a lot of, ghost story books. There's a lot of stories about the kind. There's ones in my book, of course, that people are very familiar with.
Mhm.
But it was important to me to mix that up. I wanted to give some stories that, okay, I've heard of that place, I know that place, but I also wanted to, find the nooks and crannies that, were going to be exciting to somebody in the region, right? Oh, that's my town, or that's, that's our little story, and put it out there to the masses.
Yeah,
And a few of the stories were, solicited just from friends online. It was their stories, right? Like maybe it's just a neighborhood ghost story. So,
right.
it was like I said, important for me to get a wide range of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things I want to talk about to open the show, and we talked a little bit before the show about it, and it's something that I think is a little bit controversial in the paranormal world right now, is the closing of Bobby Mackey's. Um,
Yeah,
I have a
surprise.
few friends that have been going back and forth online right now, that are a little upset about the closing of Bobby Mackey's. I know it's a sad thing in the paranormal world, especially with investigators. I know, and here's the conundrum, Mike, and that's this: with investigators, we would like the any put it this way, any haunted spot, they would like it to stay open for the rest of eternity so that they can investigate it. Of course, it's a selfish thing. I mean, but there's a few things that the paranormal world doesn't want to admit. That's one, it takes money to run. Two, let's face it, there's building codes, there's upkeep, there's other things. But three is that not only is it an expensive venture, but it doesn't make much money. There's not much
Right.
money involved in all this, right? I mean, and let's face it, it's a niche hobby. I mean,
Yeah, for
you know,
sure.
not everybody goes out and investigates haunted places.
Yeah, and I'd say, more so now, you might find some places that can, profit from it, that can stay afloat, because you've got a little bit more of that. You've got, all your cable shows and, you know, Discovery Channel and History Channel and whatever. And I think the ghost hunting is certainly more popular than it would have been when we were kids, in the
Yeah.
80s or 90s or whatever. As a hobby, I guess, or I don't even want to call it a hobby, as a research or whatever.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's not thousands of people, right? It's not,
No.
and especially the smaller places, the less popular places. I was really surprised how many people hadn't heard of Bobby Mackey's.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Even though Bobby Mackey's has been featured prominently on programs like Ghost Adventures, um, that still, even though it's had that spotlight, wasn't enough to keep it open.
Right.
Um, and it's interesting because again, I'm gonna try and pull up the Facebook uh post here, uh, because it's well, even so, I mean, Nick Groff, who used to be with Ghost Adventures, did one last lockdown uh, at at Bobby Mackey's in July.
Okay.
Um, and there was an auction, or there is an ongoing auction at least until August 15th. And one of the things that they're doing is, and this is, you and I have been talking. You had been down there yourself, um,
Yes.
to investigate. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your investigation down there? Why I try and find out what it was here that the exact circumstances behind why they're closing down Bobby Mackey's here.
Yeah, sure. So, uh, I was actually going down to Kentucky for another visit, another area, and I was able to contact Gatekeepers Paranormal, who they run the tours there, and ask them if how the tours were scheduled, if I could get in, catch if they were booked, whatever. And the timing didn't work out where I could get into one of their regular tours, but they were great, and they agreed to meet me on my way through, basically coming back home to Michigan. And I got a private tour, so just me and my girlfriend got to walk around in the dark with one of the hosts, and it was as creepy as you'd want it to be.
Mhm.
um, and I'll start with on the way down, we actually stopped just on it was a Friday night, and we stopped at midnight or so. And on Fridays and Saturdays, it's just a bar. And for anybody not familiar, it's very much like a Gillies. If you've seen the Urban Cowboy, it was modeled after that. Bobby Mackey is a musician. He was a Nashville guy. Opened the bar where he could perform. He could have other performers in. He had the mechanical bull. He had the whole 9 yards. Not quite as big as Gillies, but it was pretty impressive size wise. And it still looks probably like it did the day it opened, other than that it's, what, 50, 60 years old now. And the age shows. But we went in and they were line dancing still. I thought maybe I was seeing ghosts right then, because I think it was Achy Breaky Heart and a bunch of college kids line dancing. So I thought I might have just walked myself into a residual haunting, but it was real. So there was actually people line dancing.
Yeah.
But but anyway, when we came back, we did the visit, and I don't want to give too much of the stories away. There's a ton. We'll talk about them a little bit, I'm sure, as you're pulling out the stuff. But there's exorcisms, there's ghosts, there's murders that started the whole thing supposedly, beheadings. There's Satanism. There's, you name it. Bobby Mackey's has got it. Um, I will also say that I come to everything as a skeptic. Um, I'm very much the John Cusack in Stephen King's 1408, if you've seen
Right.
that.
Right.
So he's an investigator, right, and everything. He doesn't believe any of it, right? He's out to prove it wrong, and I'm not necessarily there to prove it wrong. I'm there to, see if I can prove it right. Uh, Not necessarily convinced yet, but anyway, we're going through Bobby's, and we're hearing some stories. And one of the earliest stories was a couple of guys that had gotten in a fight in the restroom. One guy hit the other guy. He fell. He hit his head. He died. And it was the first murder that happened in the bar. And those two fellas haunt the place. So, the host is telling us about how some other people had come through and they caught a recording, VTV, of somebody's voice. They had asked, hey, are you there? And they got this answer. So she's playing it for us. And it was creepy and it was cool. And we're in the area where it happened. So I said, well, I'm going to take a second. I'm recording with my, little hand recorder. And, I said, hey, are you there? Can you make a noise? Can you tell me you're around? And we're all sitting there and it's quiet for a second. And then the cooler popped on, the ice cooler, and scared the piss out of me. So I'm not saying it was a ghost that did it, but the timing was exquisite. And if it was, well done for them. But
Well, theatrical timing amongst ghosts is well known, Mike. I mean,
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, they're known for that sort of thing.
I
Uh,
didn't catch anything on the recording though. So
no, well, better luck next time. Uh,
right.
yeah. Um, According to, and I think what we had been talking about and what you had said before the program is absolutely true. That yeah, they are demolishing um, the original spot, and then they're moving down the road, which
Okay. Yeah.
and what you've been saying again is also true that they'd only been open like one night or two nights a week, which
Yeah.
seemed very profitable for a bar. Um, but they are closing the Wilder location, Wilder, Kentucky, and then moving to a temporary site in Florence on US 42. They opened the club in 1978, like you were pointing out, and looking for a space to play the traditional country music that Bobby always admired. They got the club's first mechanical bull in 1979, which you had pointed out. According to Mackey, it was the third one manufactured by the man who produced the bulls for Urban Cowboy, starring John Travolta. They built the first one for John Travolta to take to his ranch and learn to ride, Mackey said. The second one they built for the movie itself. The third one they made, I've got here in the basement. So go figure.
Yep.
Yeah, he's got the third one. Um, this is where it gets, I guess, a little hinky for our community. And that is, it says here that ghost hunters claim spirits linger on the property. Well, we know that they do, which was once a slaughterhouse and speakeasy for members of the mob. I've had people get scratched. Ghost hunter Laura Rowland told WCPO 9, sister station LFX 18. I've heard growling. The bar is particularly known for its old well in the basement. It was once used to drain animal blood into the river, then a tunnel to bring illegal alcohol into the club. Now, some have deemed it a gateway to hell, which is what we've seen on Ghost Adventures, right? That's that
Yeah.
famous gateway to hell. Mackey is more of a skeptic, but said he gives believers the benefit of the doubt. I stay on the country music, he said. Inside these walls, that's the history Mackey is writing now. Not a day goes by that I'm not trying to write a song. Now, it seems to me that, okay, he's demolishing the place. He's selling off the stuff that has more of a paranormal side because he just wants to move on with the country music and he wants to get on with life on the music side of things. Is that the
Yeah.
impression that you get?
Could well be, and it sounds like it there. So a lot of, I'd say, and in my book I talk about it, he was really reluctant to have any of that horror stuff, any of the ghost stuff, right? So you had mentioned Carl, so I want to kind of bring it around to him. So early there was, of course, you said I mentioned the murders in the bar. You had the whole well and the gateway to hell and the slaughterhouse. My investigation says that probably wasn't a slaughterhouse. That was probably down the road a little bit. But they kind of jumble that stuff together, things that happened in the area, kind of close to there. Maybe it was there, whatever. But as time went on, what really kicked it into high gear was in the 80s. Where they were having their music stuff, and Bobby had a guy that worked for him named Carl. Now, in hindsight, Carl probably had some serious mental issues that should have been dealt with. I don't mean to make light of that. It's just, in hindsight, some of the stuff that you hear, some of the things that happened, he may have been kind of manipulated into some things, but he lived above the bar, in an apartment above the bar, and his apartment's still there. People leave all kinds of things for him, cigarettes and whatever, his little token offerings if you go up there and visit. But he claimed right away that there was ghosts, there was, he was hearing things, there was stuff going on, and Bobby just was like, okay, just keep it quiet. I don't want to scare people away from the bar. I just want people to come listen to the country music. But they had a friend who was a horror writer, Doug Hensley, and he caught wind of this. Carl's telling him the story, and eventually Doug convinced him to let him tell the story in a book, write a book about it. That escalated so much in that time, from Carl sharing that story to the time the book comes out, where now Carl's possessed. They're doing exorcisms on Carl up in the room, right? There's people coming in. It was just nuts, right? And if you're talking 80s, Satanic Panic was the name of the game in the 80s, right?
Oh,
Everything was, so it was big interest, right? You had the Warrens out there investigating everything in the 70s and 80s, and it really did put the place on the map, more so than the country music did. But like you said, he was in the beginning he was reluctant, and as you're saying now, it kind of sounds like he wants to move on, and I think that's probably largely true. I don't think he ever really embraced that. He just kind of let it happen. He realized, it was bringing people. So
there is one exception, though, that's in the latter part of the article. He claims he is bringing the portal to hell with him to the new bar.
Which, yeah. Well, the portal to hell, I did go check out the portal to hell. It's just kind of a dirty hole in the ground.
Right.
But and I'll leave it for the book to describe a little bit more about what some people think is or isn't a portal to hell. But I'm curious to see how he's going to take it with him exactly. Like he's going to dig up a chunk of ground and just bowl it over.
You're gonna laugh when he describes what he's gonna do with it, though, Mike. It just screams kitsch. I mean, and I think most ghost hunters too will kind of roll their eyes when they hear this too. Here's how Bobby describes it. So he says, Mackey said the demolition is bittersweet, but a necessity. He says, I love this old building, but the key word is old building. He also said he's excited for the future and the memories to come. He says several fan favorites will stick around at the rebuilt location, including that portal to hell. Here's his quote. Buckle in, kids. It gets a little cringy. Put some lights in it, glass over it, a rail around it, Mackey said. People will be able to see it. It'll be right in the main part of the club.
So are they rebuilding? Now, I thought they were rebuilding in the same location. That was my impression originally when I first heard about them closing down, that they were going to move, they're going to demolish that building, and then I thought maybe they were rebuilding in the same location, but that might not be correct. I'd be curious to see how they move the portal if they don't, but
I don't know. They say that the temporary location is in Florence, where he expects to be for about a year or so. They don't say where the new location is, or if the location is going to be on the old location. If so, how do you move a portal to Florence and then bring it back again? That
Yeah, I don't. He's probably not doing anything for that first year, right? But I think they might be building on the same location. I'll have to dig in and see what I can figure out. And then, and then you can still, have the horror stuff, right? You're still there. But what interests me more, uh, in sort of, I guess, the continuing eeriness of Bobby Mackey's, is the idea that they're auctioning off a bunch of Carl's stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Now, as a guy that, loves horror and ghost stories and everything else, right? It's like the haunted doll going to somebody's house, right? I mean, you could be
Right,
sending ghosty things all over the country, right? That people are
right,
buying.
right. I mean, if you're truly coming back to that location, why are some? I mean, because supposedly Carl was possessed. If Carl was
Yeah,
possessed and different things were happening to Carl, why is this stuff in some of the actual items from the bar, which supposedly has some of that, whether it be active or residual energy in it? Why is it being shipped out? Why are people
right.
getting pieces of it? And like you pointed out, Mike, why is it going around the country? Why is it not staying with the location or being shipped to the new location in Florence?
Right.
Why are we getting rid of it? What see, to me, this is it sounds to me like maybe Bobby wants to start over, but he's not letting people know he's starting over.
Right.
It's kind of I want to embrace the new, but I want to leave the old behind, but I want a piece of the old because I still want people around. I still want that crowd around.
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't want to let go of the revenue, but it's
Yeah, exactly.
so
That's exactly what it sounds like.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a wishy-washy response. Like I don't want to let go of the revenue, but at the same time, I want a new start.
Yeah.
You know, it it um it sounds like a guy who's stuck between two worlds, is what it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I to me, and you know what this is reminiscent of? It's very reminiscent of the management that has gone back and forth, or the different management terms or teams that have gone through the Queen Mary. There's been a lot of
Oh, yeah, yeah.
management teams that have done this at the Queen Mary. There have been management teams that have gone through the Stanley Hotel that have done this.
Hmm.
The we don't need the paranormal. Oh, you know what? Turns out we do because
Yeah,
it's nice,
exactly.
it's nice revenue. Um, and every time there's a management team that comes in that says, we don't need the freaks, they go, oh, you know what? We need the freaks.
Yeah, the
Um,
freaks were the only ones showing up.
that's it. They're the only ones who are
Nobody
loyal to
wants to go
us.
to an old, hotel in Colorado up on the mountain next to nothing, for no reason.
That's right.
You need something to bring you in. Like otherwise, it's just an old hotel.
That's right. That's right. So it's a cottage industry, and that's what people find out. Well, it is a cottage industry,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
they choose to
But
abandon.
like you said, it's hard to restart it. It's hard to have that be your own whole industry, right? It's hard to
Right.
subside
Right.
just as a paranormal spot, like
Right.
someplace like I have the Winchester house in my book,
Let's
someplace like that,
let's talk about the
that's their
Winchester.
whole niche, right?
Right. Let's talk about the Winchester House before we go to break. The
Okay.
Winchester House is a place I've never been. I'm fascinated by it. Tell us a little bit about the Winchester House and your experience there and what you found there.
So Winchester heir, William Winchester, built the house for his wife Sarah. Sarah always had an issue with kind of the money that came with the Winchester fortune and the fact that it was, blood money, so to speak, right, built on guns. So once her husband passed away, she's started building onto the house because she was convinced that spirits were telling her to do so, and if she didn't, then tragedy would strike. So it was for I don't know, decades, a constant construction project, right? So, and it'd just be okay. You finished putting that house on or that room on the extension. Let's put another room on that. Let's put one on top. So crazy that there's doors that go nowhere. They just open onto walls. There's stairs that go up to the ceiling, and there's no, there's not just the stairs into the ceiling. That's it. It's like just the most ridiculous place. Like a Willy Wonka funhouse,
Right.
is what I, is what you can imagine.
Yeah.
But She just kept doing it, putting the money into it, putting the money into it, putting the money into it, and contractors would come and go. Some would say they would experience things that would scare them right out. There's nails in the wall, that aren't hammered all the way in, and the stories that, mid swing, that carpenter saw a ghost or something that terrified him, and just out he went, dropped his hammer and went, so the nail never got driven the rest of the way. But now it's really, like you said, it's kind of a quiche, kind of, it's there's subsiding on the paranormal part of it. There's no other, draw to the house, right? It's not a bed and breakfast. I mean, you can stay there, but it's not going to be a bed and breakfast or something like that. It's just this crazy place with this fantastic story. So they do, Halloween events, they do tours, of course. But yeah, just made it a full cottage industry, based on poor woman's mental state.
I mean, there's even an arcade inside the Winchester.
Yeah. I think there's a cafeteria, I think, in the basement, if I
Yeah,
remember right. Yeah,
yeah, just
and it's a
bizarre.
huge, beautiful house. I mean, it's
Yeah,
insane looking,
yeah.
but it's you can imagine decades of construction how big it is.
Right, right. Bizarre, bizarre. Well, I tell you what, we'll take a break right here. When we come back, Mike, I want to talk about a couple of different spots. I want to talk about a couple of Midwest spots. I want to talk about First Avenue, and I want to talk about the Pfister Hotel. A
All
couple
right.
of interesting Midwest spots. And when I come back, I want to also talk about, I want to first talk about a couple of spots that I've been to. I want to start first in the West. I want to talk about um, Tombstone, Arizona, which I'm quite fond of. A friend and listener of this show brought us out to Arizona a few years ago. Um, and I didn't know what I would think about Arizona. So I want to wax nostalgic about Tombstone for a moment. And and then I want to talk about that spot in Thornton, Colorado, about that lonely road. And what is it about haunted roads? I'm curious about what it is about the phenomena of stretches of roads. So I want to talk about that with you when we come back. And then I want to talk about clubs. What is it about clubs
Clubs. Yeah.
and we're going to talk about First Avenue right here in Minnesota, the club that Prince made. We're going to talk
Yes.
about that when we come back because it is the 40th anniversary of Purple Rain. So we'll talk
Correct.
about First
One of
Avenue.
my favorite albums.
There you go. So we'll talk about Prince and the fact that the Revolution just played there recently. It was I forget what they call the festival that they hold every year here now with Prince in the summertime, celebrating his life. But it just came up in July, and it's centered around his birthday. And essentially, we had everybody in town except for I want to say who missed the festival. There was somebody important that missed the festival. Was it Morris Day? I think it might have been Morris Day. Not sure.
Oh, yeah.
I I'll have to
I
look it
I
up.
feel like I loved Prince. I appreciate Prince even more as I'm older.
Yeah,
But when I was, I'm a Gen Xer, much like yourself. So when I was a kid growing up, 1980s Purple Rain, required watching number of times, had it on video cassette, have that album behind me. I thought Morris Day was better in that. I enjoyed the Morris Day performances better.
you know what's interesting is, and he was, you know what, there was a few performances that were much better. And you know what's interesting, and we'll talk about when we come back. Some of the rare performances, when you think some of those other movies weren't as good, go back and look at movies like Under the Cherry Moon and go back and look at the musical performances, not the acting performances,
Right. Yeah.
but the musical performances in Graffiti Bridge were actually brilliant. We'll
Yeah.
talk about that as well. We'll get into it when we come back.
All
Uh,
right.
our guest is Mike Kozlowski. The book is a brilliant one, folks, and I want you to go check it out. American Ghost Stories is available right now. American Ghost Stories, True Tales from all 50 states. We have a link in the description of this program. When we come back, we'll talk haunted roads, we'll talk clubs, and we'll talk hotels. And what is it about the hauntings of all three? When we come back, right here on the best in true crime podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is Mike Kozlowski. The book is American Ghost Stories, True Tales from All 50 States. Brilliant book, folks. Great book. It's well written. It's got a great sense of humor to it as well. And you'll thumb through it very quickly. I'll tell you that much. I read through it very quickly. Wonderful book, and I encourage you to go out and get it. Not only does it have some of the more, let's just say, well-known spots out there that you can ghost hunt, you're going to find some spots in this book, folks, you had no idea were haunted, and some places that may be in your backyard that you had no idea were haunted, that you may just decide you want to show up and investigate. By the way, get permission first. That's always a good idea to do. Mike, I teased before the break that we were going to talk about a couple of different subjects that, let's just say, are unusual. But before we do that, I want to wax nostalgic about a place that I was invited out to by a friend and listener quite a few years ago. A friend of ours said, you know what, they're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the movie Tombstone, and invited us out to be a part of it here on Darkness Radio, which I thought was absolutely amazing. We got to interview Michael Biehn. We got to interview a few of the people from the movie Tombstone. We got to go on lots of different tours of Tombstone, and one of them was the Birdcagetheater. And I found when I read the chapter in your book about Tombstone, it was, man, did you just paint that thing not only accurately, but I mean, you did such a good job of painting what Tombstone was, not only the history of it, but the way it is now. To that, I tip my cap to you.
Thanks, appreciate that. Tombstone was one of the places I visited. I've been there a couple times myself. First visit way back, probably 30 years ago or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a kid that Clint Eastwood fan, right? I grew up loving the cowboy movies, the spaghetti westerns, all that good stuff. So, I had my cowboy hat on and my cowboy boots, and I was heading to Tombstone, Arizona, as one of my favorite vacations. Get to pretend to be Wyatt Earp and all that great stuff, and so many stories. I always love the stories of the Old West, the legends, I'll say, of the Old West,
Yeah.
The mythology of it, right? So Tombstone was great. It was almost the ghost town I expected it to be. I've been to some other places. There's a place in Arizona. The name escapes me now. I visited while I was there, but it's sort of a made up Western town, right? It's like a Western theme park. Like you can shoot against people, you can rope cows or whatever. We have one in Michigan too, or we used to. So it had that look to it still, but it was fairly deserted. It wasn't a complete, nobody's lived here for 50 years, but it was largely deserted. It was kind of sad. It felt like a ghost town, to me. I mean, you had the stores and but it wasn't as bustling as maybe, you'd think a theme park sort of attraction would be, and not as deserted as maybe a proper ghost town would be. So it's stuck somewhere in the middle. A little bit commercialized. I think Birdcage, if I remember correctly, is the only original building standing.
Right.
But also the one with the best stories. So
What was I just want to get your impression of how did you feel when you first got to Tombstone? Did it feel lonely to you? To me, it almost feels, you can almost feel this, not only the spirits there, but you can almost feel how someone in that era of the Wild West, the Old West would have felt. It's kind of a somber, sad feeling, isn't it?
yeah, I think that it pretty accurately describes it. It did feel like you almost stepped back. You could place yourself back in time there very easily. If you've got a little bit of imagination, you can imagine what the carriages going by, and the dust up in your nose, and all that good stuff. And as you walk down to the OK Corral, where they've got kind of The last time I was there, those mannequins were looking pretty rough. those
Yeah,
the
yeah,
dummies they have out there.
yeah.
But walking, just kind of coming around that corner, you almost expect to hear a gunshot. It's you very much feels like you're back there. And for me, I think the birdcage was great. I think the coolest or the most impactful spot was walking up to Boot Hill, and being up by the old graves and that,
Yep.
that wasn't particularly commercialized, right? It was kind of left respectful, kind of just off on its own. You almost wouldn't know it was there unless you really went looking, at least the last time I was there, and it's been a bit, but it wasn't like signs this way or pay your dollar to go up to Boot Hill or anything. It was just a little cemetery up on the hill, so yeah, you could standing there kind of that was I don't know, introspective maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I stayed literally a stone's throw away from the Earp house. And it was, I tell you, it was really historic. It was really cool. And I stayed in a haunted house. So it was really amazing. I mean, it was
Yeah.
the whole thing was it was an amazing week. Um, and I'd love to do it again. I want to do it again in the worst way, and I want to get back there again in the worst way. One, because I mean, having a broken neck and back, I my pain level was zero while I was there. The weather's amazing. Especially if you're a chronic pain sufferer, you have almost
Yeah.
pain while you're there. But then the the second reason I think, and especially in the wintertime, it's a great place to be. The second reason is it just feels it's almost like if you could tell someone what it feels like to step into a like a Star Wars set, like a different foreign, it almost feels like a foreign land, but not being in a foreign land, right? It's like
Right.
it's like jumping into a different time. It almost feels like that without being in a different time. I mean, obviously you're in 2024. Um, but the town really buys in. It just really buys into, the old saloon feel, the old feel, the old ways. Even though they're very modern, people have cell phones, of course. That of course they're watching direct TV in the bar. But
Right.
but at the same time, you truly do believe at any time someone's gonna have a shootout in the middle of the street. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
you
And
know.
there was, I mentioned in the book when I walked through the birdcage, and it could have been psychosomatic somewhat, but I could smell the cigar smoke, I could smell the whiskey, like, like that stuff was, baked into the wood, into the bones of the place. It's just, yeah, like I don't know, dragging it up through time.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not unusual. And I believe when we were in the birdcage, somebody thought they did smell cigar smoke. That was one of the things that I had read in your book that I was like, oh yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that happened when we were there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Kind of regular, I guess. So.
yeah, yeah,
And so much so that, as they say in the book, I thought, oh, they're just piping that in, right? They're making it smell this way, like if somebody's got a candle burning somewhere of,
right.
you know, the Wyatt Earp scented candle, or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But
But no, I truly do believe that if there's such a thing as a residual haunting going on top of an active haunting, it can happen in that town. That if a
yeah,
portal
yeah,
drop into anywhere, it would happen in that town in Tombstone.
yeah.
Um, was Tombstone as far as Arizona went? Was that the only place you got into Arizona? Have you ever been up to Sedona or anywhere there?
Oh yeah, but no, went to Sedona while I was there.
Did you?
Beautiful. Yeah, it was, of course, it's Arizona. You get off the plane and it's like dry heat maybe, but it's still 100 degrees, man.
Oh yeah,
Dry or not.
your
But
eyes dry right out. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, we walked around Sedona. It was a hot, hot day. But beautiful, driving into town there in the Red Rocks and the mountains and gorgeous. And we stayed in Phoenix, and then we actually drove from Phoenix to San Diego.
Oh
So
wow.
we drove through nothing, right? A desert for. It was weird when people are loading you up with water on your way out. And like, just in case.
right? You got to
Like put this 5 gallons of water in the trunk.
right. Just in case something breaks down, you don't want to be out there
Yeah.
alone. Yeah, it's a long
Yeah.
drive.
Yeah.
Not a lot of gas stations. Um, the there's a another interesting place that I've been to, and again, I'm just going to touch on it. We're not going to get into details really about it, but the old Washoe Club, Virginia City, Nevada. I love Virginia City. I've investigated there many times, especially the Washoe Club. Um, the Washoe Club, if you want to talk about a haunted spot, is one of the most haunted spots I'm convinced on this planet. You talk about shadow people, especially you talk about extenuating circumstances. You talk about a club that was built for elites that
Right.
had all kinds of different circumstances behind it, everything from prostitutes that were supposedly kept behind closed doors to circumstances that were bad that were happening in that
Yeah.
club. Um,
And Virginia City itself, just the rise and falls and the many births and deaths of that, from silver to, fires to, mines running out to, you know, just, yeah, ghost basically to a ghost town, back to life. It just,
yeah,
uh, it's a ghost in its own right.
yeah. And again, another spot that's been featured on TV shows like Ghost Adventures. And you guys know the lore, you've heard it. But again, Mike does an excellent job of covering those details in the book. One of the places you covered, and I want to talk a little bit about this, and I don't get this phenomena, Mike, is haunted roads. Okay, so
Yeah.
when when I
So sorry.
when I
Here's
was
what I'll say.
oh, go ahead. You want to talk about haunted roads?
Well, I'll say this. The hauntings seem to occur in the same places, right? There's every insane asylum is haunted. Every lighthouse is haunted.
You have a great
Every,
line in the book. It's a wonderful line, and I was trying to find it. I'm trying to remember. It's in the 50s in the book, as far as or maybe it's the 30s or 40s in the book. You say every ghost hunter knows that if they run into a tuberculosis hospital or any type of hospital, that son of a bitch is haunted. It's
yes.
something to that effect. But the line is hysterical. It made me laugh out loud. Um,
Yeah, and I think it's just, I mean, those places lend themselves to that sort, they're filled with tragedy and whatever, so they lend themselves to stories that would result in ghosts, somebody died, a hotel for sure, somebody, you know, lost their love of their life there or something, or, got left at the altar in a church, or they, the lighthouse soul weird keeper up by himself that, whatever it is, the prisons. Oh my God, every prison.
well,
So roads tend to be like that. You get a nice, good, dark, long, windy road. That son of a bitch is haunted.
But is it because of the emotion? I mean, think about it. You think about a car accident and the emotion, the power behind a car collision. Um,
Right.
it,
Yeah, so then whether you're a skeptic or a believer, right? It's either you could say, and so as a skeptic, I'll veer off just a little bit off point.
Go
As
ahead.
a skeptic, I don't discount anybody's stories ever. That's your experience. Whatever caused it, we can argue about, but I would never discount the experience. That said, I haven't had an experience that has convinced me, but if I were to believe in ghosts, I'd be more likely to believe in something like a residual haunting, something, energy based, because I do believe in energy, and that it doesn't get destroyed, right? It has to go somewhere. It goes into something. It becomes something new. Maybe it lingers, right? So those are the type of ghost stories I would be more likely to believe. And to your point, the more impactful something is, the more emotional it is. Whether that just drives the idea of a story that's tragic, or whether it's something that is, powerful enough in itself to become, you know, a spirit, a ghost, a haunting, whatever. That's whether that's the believer versus skeptic. But I think the energy is something we all agree on.
Right. Yeah. Well, we a long, long time ago on the show, we had a spirit photographer who was on who had he had pictures from the scenes of this is just gruesome to talk about, Mike. Pictures from the scenes of accidents where you would
Hmm.
see a slumped body, but then you would see the spirit of that body right
Okay.
to the
Yeah.
body and like holding its hands up to the window and screaming. Things like that. I mean,
Hmm.
just gruesome images where
Yeah.
you would see the spirit having left the body, but it's still there. And it's
Right.
it's almost like it's freaked out.
Well,
Like
and it's
seeing
something
what's
like,
around it.
I mean, the things in our lives that leave a mark on us just in our daily lives, right?
Mhm.
Heartbreak, losing your first love or whatever, somebody's death, those things, when you amplify them into some more tragic type of it, right? This is a more tragic heartbreak where somebody committed suicide because they were so heartbroken, or because that every ghost. So, right, every heartbroken lady. I mean, all the lady in whites lost their husbands in some tragic accident or whatever. Right? But if you take those, we can understand how powerful they are just in our own lives while we're alive. If it is so powerful that it killed us or caused us to be killed, then how much more powerful is that? And like you're saying, how much more does it create the thing, whether the haunting or the spirit or the.
Right, right. So there's this road out there in Thornton, Colorado, and as I'm
Yeah.
about it, I'm thinking this. Okay, so when I was younger, my uncle and my aunt, my cousin lived out in that area. They had two trailers that were butted up against each other, as want to do out there. I mean, you don't need an actual
Right.
house out there. I mean, because there's not that much inclement weather, right? So they had two trailers that were butted up against each other. My cousin lived in one, my aunt and uncle lived in another. And they were on this huge plot of land. I mean, huge plot of land. And there was a farmer that was right next to him that had another huge plot of land. And I just remember having to drive forever to get to their plot of land, right? And I just remember I remember going into town with David, my cousin, one night to go to the bar. And actually, I've got some really hairy stories about my cousin David too, because let's just put it this way: he had some issues, he had some mental issues, and the way he exited that area was not a good way to go. Okay, he ended up coming to Minneapolis because let's just say they didn't like him too much in that area. Um, I'll leave that story for another day. Uh, but uh, but I remember him saying some stuff about, well, there's some areas in in this town that they got a history. They don't, and I was like, a history? What do you mean? Well, he'd say, well, there's some areas that ghost stories and hauntings and stuff like that. And I thought he was just, pardon my language, talking out of his ass, right?
Right.
Like, yeah, sure. And he's like, no, 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 seriously. There's this area of town, there's that area of town. And I could have swore he talked about this Riverdale Road at one time.
So so Riverdale is about 11 miles long, windy, dark road, um, running there outside of Thornton, and it has every story associated to it that haunted roads have. Like usually, a haunted road is a hitchhiker that died and was trying to make their way home or something, or somebody was hit by a car, or the runaway vehicle that was going too fast and went off the cliff, and now it races other cars and drives them off the cliff or what. All of those things happen at Riverdale Road. Every one of them. There's a story that checks every box.
Wow.
But then also the area itself, as you're saying, there's different areas. Your visit your uncle, you said, was saying, here and there, and different spots around the town. So the area itself was thought to be by the natives that had lived in the area was rotten land. So it was an area they didn't care to be around. So, it sort of has that history to it right from the very far back, not just the road, itself. It's the whole area that has some bad mojo, let's say.
Wow. See, I remember staying at the Brighton. There's a motel in Brighton. At the time, it was brand new. This is back in early 2000s. And I remember walking out of the motel in Brighton, and looking, you look out on the horizon, you see the mountain, right? You see one of the mountains, Rocky Mountains, out in the horizon, way out in the horizon, because it's, flat with the exception of the mountain. And thinking, wow, this is beautiful country. And when you talk to the uncle and the cousin, they're like, it ain't as beautiful as you think it is. And you're like, well, why? And then they talk about, this is cursed and that's cursed. And yeah, you don't want to live out here. It's not that great. You're like, oh, why is everybody so negative, right? And you're
Right.
you're standing in God's country, but everybody's talking about, yeah, this person died, that person died, this person's weird, that person's weird. It's just like, I mean, I didn't hear anybody once talk about anything positive in that area.
Yeah, and there's a whole nother story there about a man killing his whole family in a mansion, and sort of lingers onto the satanic sort of side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's not. Before I wrote the book, it certainly wasn't a place I'd heard of, that
No,
I'd thought of, right? So it was an interesting one to find that I think most readers probably wouldn't be familiar with,
it's
unless you live
it's
there.
literally halfway between Denver and the mountains. I mean,
Right.
it's a halfway point. I mean, you'd never know. I mean, unless you live there, you wouldn't know about the
Yeah.
place if you live there. It's just it's bizarre. But that's why when I saw the I saw it in your book, I was like, there's no way you know about this place.
Yeah, man, I dig deep. I got enough stories for like three more books just on this. So part of my process was every state. Once I decided I wanted to do a story from every state, make kind of a travel log sort of book, was to sometimes it was just internet research. I was reaching out to friends, across the country and other writers, and tell me your ghost stories. What do you got? What do you hear? What's popular in your area? And there's a couple of those in the book. But I probably narrowed it down to 5 or 6 stories per state. Um, and then it was a balancing act of, what were the most interesting stories. I could have wrote 50 stories just on lighthouses, like I said, like every light, right? So, I tried to balance that out. Not always the same thing, not just 50 stories about, you know, schools and insane asylums and tuberculosis wards and whatever.
Right.
So,
Right.
but on the plus side, I do literally have probably enough material for, to compile another 3 or 4 books in the same vein. So, which I think I'll get back to eventually. Another.
We'll get to a couple that I want to talk about here in a second. I just want to mention some of the places that you've talked about here in the book because they're amazing. Eh, some of the places that you can read about here in the book that again I encourage you to get. We have a link in the description of this program where you can go get the book. Um, you talk about uh, you talk about the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, the Congress Plaza Hotel in Chicago, which, by the way, I've been in that as well, the Congress Plaza. Um, you talk about the Blennerhassett Island in Parkersburg, West Virginia, Highway 365, and again another haunted road, and
Yeah, there's a couple roads in there. Yeah.
the Loretta Lynn Ranch in Hurricane Mills, Tennessee, the USS North Carolina in Wilmington, North Carolina, St. Augustine Lighthouse, which has been featured many times on television, the LaLaurie Mansion, which is up for sale again in New Orleans,
Yes, I saw that.
Maple Hill
I
Cemetery.
wouldn't have just bought a house in Detroit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's only a couple $1 million. I mean,
Right.
yeah. I mean, if we all pool our pennies together, Mike, we can get it. The Betsy Ross House in Philadelphia, which has a long haunted history, which I've been by. I haven't been in, but I've been by. Um, 966 Lindley Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut. You have a lot of different legends in here as well. Uh, Different haunted high schools in Alaska, the Night Marchers in Hawaii. We've talked about the Night Marchers here in on the show before. That's a scary story. That is
Yeah,
that
that's
that
yeah.
story is creepy. By the way, you got to pick up the book to read that one. That one is absolutely spine tingling. Um, let's talk about a couple of places that I love to talk about here on the show that are right here in the Midwest, um, and are kind of close to my heart. The one I love to hear about as a Minnesota Twins fan that I don't love when the Minnesota Twins have to go to Milwaukee is the Pfister Hotel.
Okay.
Uh, the Pfister, although it's housed presidents and it's housed many dignitaries, also happens to be where the Brewers like to put up the opposing team when they come to town because they don't tend to get a good night's sleep. What is it about the Pfister that makes it so special, Mike?
Yeah, so the Pfister checks all the boxes for haunted hotels, right? An old hotel, luxurious, built on an old burial ground. Whoops. That's that's always a mistake. So there's another one of your check your haunted places boxes. If it's on an old burial ground, yep, haunted. Anybody who saw Poltergeist knows that.
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah,
But yeah, there's some different stories about people meeting nefarious ends in the Pfister Hotel, and a lot of those stories are coming from, as you said, some of our famous baseball players who've had things happen. Well, there's another story in the book that deals with more basketball players, but this one is the baseball players. It's another hotel that's haunted and likes to mess with famous people. But some of the players like Bryce Harper of the Nationals, he said that he woke up with all his clothes on the floor where he had, folded them and been, nice and neat and whatever, and they got thrown over to the other side of the floor. There's, some of them that have been touched and, had seen spirits in their rooms. The staff members there, I'll tell you, the second floor is just crazy haunted with the old hotel, the original builder, owner of the hotel, his spirit wandering around, and of course it has cold spots and disembodied voices, all the properly haunted hotel things, you know. But yeah, not a good place for the visiting team. They probably come out a little lackluster for
yeah,
especially for the day games.
yeah. It's a tough place to sleep. I know my co-host Beer City Bruiser uh, spent many nights at the Pfister there as part of Ring of Honor, and his tag team partner. He's not a he's kind of a fraidy cat. He doesn't like to stay at the Pfister either. So it's a tough place to stay, but that's one of those ones that I think as a paranormal investigator, if you get a shot to stay there at the Pfister in Milwaukee, you want to take your advantage of it and you want to get there.
Yeah,
You definitely
absolutely.
stay there. Yeah, definitely. I think as we begin to wrap things up today, I want to come right back here to home to Minneapolis, to a place that I've seen probably way too many concerts at, which is First Avenue. Um, and one of the things, although I will tell you, as someone who's been to many concerts at First Avenue and spent time before a concert, like as bands have loaded in, because I've had friends who've been in bands who have loaded in, especially in Seventh Street Entry, and spent time after concerts. Although I've never had the privilege of being able to spend time a long time after concerts there, but enough time to where I've been one of the last patrons in the bar. Um, you can feel a buzz in First Avenue. It's a
Yeah,
different.
definitely a great music venue.
Mhm.
Some of the biggest, performers there. Prince really put it on the map, of course,
Yeah.
hometown. But U2's played there. The Black Keys, the Pretenders. Just saw the Pretenders last week.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you catch them with Foo Fighters?
Yeah, yeah, down in Cincinnati actually. Went down
Yeah,
there.
they just played
What a
up
great
here.
show.
Yep, they just played up here last weekend. So,
Cool.
yep.
Anyway, sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. I'm a huge Foo Fighters fan myself, so
Yeah,
yeah, no, it's a
yeah, it was a great show, great show.
yep. Um,
But yeah, but great music venue. The First Avenue Club, originally a bus station, and that's where the most famous haunting at the Pfister originates. A woman there, as we mentioned, right, lost her love. Was so heartbroken that she went into the bus station, into the women's bathroom, and hung herself in one of the stalls. and so she, no pun intended, hangs around the Pfister. um, Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Terrible. Uh, so she she's seen often, in the bathroom, seen after hours. Different paranormal investigators have come in, with no prior knowledge of the story, supposedly, and see the woman or can describe what happened, and there's cold spots and all that other great stuff. And there's some other spirits that are seeing people, appearing, disappearing, unknown strangers, whatever. But really, the woman is the main spirit
Yeah.
at the Fister, or at the First
First
Avenue
Avenue.
Club.
Yep.
And um, they have one ghost they call Flippy. He's kind of
Yep.
fun. But he likes to make a balloon appear
Oh,
out of nowhere, right? And it'll float like up against the current or whatever. And he seems to be just a fun ghost that likes to play with people. But
that's true.
and
That's true.
and the
Go ahead.
investigators have said the woman herself is not necessarily harmful or vindictive or anything, that she's just looking for attention. So
That's true.
so nobody really to be scared of there.
I did take part in one of the investigations you mentioned in your book, and I actually went down into the basement and I got to take a meter reading. There's one thing about First Avenue that nobody has pointed out, and that's this: there are some transformers in the basement, which are incredibly, and you're going to love this as a skeptic, Mike. They are extremely old and they are extremely leaky, and they're sitting near puddles of water.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah. In fact, I went up to one with a EMF meter, and I was probably 3 feet away, and it was bouncing a 64 or 65. I mean, it was leaking a lot of EMF.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was bad. I was afraid my balls were gonna fry. So yeah, there was
Hope you don't want any more kids, or
yeah, they needed XL energy out there, like bad, like start sealing stuff up. And there's actually, and it's funny because the employees say, well, we don't like going down to the basement. Well, no shit, you don't
Well,
like going
yeah,
down.
it's gonna feel weird for sure.
Right, right. And because they're like, well, stuff feels spooky down there. Well, the reason it feels spooky is because when you go down there, there's so much EMF down there that, because they say, well, it feels like somebody's watching you. Well, the reason it feels like someone's watching you is there's so much EMF bouncing down there that you feel weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mystery solved, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's your number one reason. Um, but there are areas within First Avenue where people think they may be followed by a spirit, where there are high areas of EMF. The other thing is too is look at how much sound cable is run throughout that place, and lights and
Right.
stuff like that. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's a reason why it's
There's
weird.
yeah, there's so much energy in
Yeah.
your energy.
And that place is so small. I know you've been in it, you've probably been in it before.
Yeah.
It is a compact club.
Right. Yeah.
Lucky if you get 1,000 people in there. And I've
Yeah.
been to wrestling carts there too. First Wrestling runs WrestlePalooza out of there. And man, when you pack people in there, you're in there like a sardine.
Right.
And
And that's just uncomfortable. I mean, those are things that cause anxiety, right? Cause that
yes.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times when there's a lot of people in there, a lot of energy going, and they're running everything full bore, they try to use the best equipment they have there, and they have some state of the art equipment. But at the same time, the shielding on some of that stuff, I don't think is the best.
Right.
The stuff in the basement. Um, I'm just saying, if there's a lot of EMF going around and a lot of people, my guess is that there's a lot of because I remember going up in the second deck, the second part of the second deck of the
Hmm.
in taking readings. I was pulling like 20s and 22s and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
still a high level of EMF.
Right.
And there's people who say, well, if it feels like there's something in the corner in the second part or the second deck of the the club, or I think I see shadows over there or something like that. Are you, or are you seeing something with high EMF? So,
All right.
you know, to me, sure, you may be seeing a spirit, or does, there's the school of thought. Does high EMF open a portal that brings it through a spirit, or does high EMF mess with your brain,
Yeah, right. To
makes
make you
you
think
think?
you saw a spirit. Yeah,
Yeah. So,
exactly. Yeah.
but First Avenue is always one of those ones that's, to me, is an interesting conundrum when it comes to the spirit world. But
And if nothing else, you see some great music.
that's right. That's why I love investigating First Avenue. It's always a special place in my heart. I love that place, and they always have such great music and great bands.
Yeah.
I've been going there since I was 18 years old to see bands. We had a relationship with them in college. I I had the most enviable relationship with them. I was a music director for a while at my college radio station, and
Oh,
we had a run of the place. They gave us free passes for any concert you could.
right.
So we were in and out of
That's
there all
great.
the time. So it was a great relationship with them. So
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad it was in the book for you to conjure up all those memories.
yeah, yeah. In fact, I love the fact that you had the picture of the old Greyhound station, and
Yeah.
the fact that you've got the picture of First Avenue there. And I love the fact that people can see the stars on the wall outside. I love the fact that there's no pictures of people panhandling out front. That's wonderful. No, I'm kidding. Normally there's 18 people out front asking for your money, but
All
there's
right.
your picture. So you must have taken it, or you must have gotten a hold of a picture that must have been taken. I don't know, on a Sunday. Uh, no, but yeah, I encourage people to go get the book. The book is amazing, folks. It is available right now. We have a link in the description of this program for you to go get it. It's American Ghosts Stories, True Tales from All 50 States. It is available by Visible Ink Press. It has a foreword by our friend Richard Estep, who is signing off and endorsing on it. It's a great book, folks. Mike, any final thoughts before we sign off here today?
No, I mean, just I've had a great time, Jet. It's been wonderful. Thanks for having me on. I hope everybody gets a chance to check out the book. You can follow me, find my other stuff, of course, Amazon. My website is www.michaelakoslowski.com. You can email me there at mike@mikekozlowski.com. There's a store on there. You can get signed books, all that good stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, check that out. It links to all my other social medias, although I'm narrowing those down considerably these days, just for my own mental health. Yeah, it was great fun writing it. It's been getting great reviews, some great feedback. So I hope people will check it out. I give it a review on Amazon. That always helps us sell some more books and get the algorithm working in our favor.
Perfect.
And I got some other stuff coming out soon with Visible Ink. And I'm working on 2 books now, so those will come out in the next year. They'll probably come out one after the other, 1 year. So hopefully I'll be back on the show to talk about those ones.
Perfect. All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being on the program, and we'll have you back on when you have those other books coming out.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.
For more audio and video archives of the show, visit darknessradioshow.com. Thanks for watching.